Absolutely. Here's Section 1. The Apex Hunters of Korzak, written with a minimum of 700 words. Hashtag Section 1. The Apex Hunters of Korzak. The planet Korzak wasn't listed on any of the standard interstellar travel charts. Not because it was secret, but because any vessel that approached its orbit never returned. The few automated probes that dared to skim its atmosphere transmitted back only fragments, molten rivers that never cooled, lightning that arced across the horizon in chaotic storms, and skies choked with ash and razor-sharp crystalline rain. Gravity pressed nearly twice as hard as Earth's, and even orbital satellites began to tear apart under the constant stress of magnetic interference. Korzak was not just a death world. It was the Death World. Class 12, the highest known rating for planetary hostility. It was where ecosystems fought for dominance in every breath, where the air itself could peel paint off a warship, and where the Korzaki were born, not in safety, but in fury. They stood nearly 12 feet tall, their bodies encased in layers of dense, living carapace that adapted and hardened with age. 6 limbs, each capable of bearing a ton of weight or crushing armor, and eyes designed to see across ultraviolet and thermal spectrums. Their physiology was forged by generations of survival. Where most species developed medicine, the Korzaki developed regeneration. Where others created weapons, the Korzaki became them. Their society reflected their environment, harsh, unyielding, built on a rigid code of strength, conquest, and the sacred law of the predator. To lead, one had to defeat. To rise, one had to dominate. And once the Korzaki achieved interstellar travel, their view of the galaxy became simple. If you cannot fight, you do not deserve to live. Entire civilizations had fallen to their brutal campaigns. Dozens of species, once proud in their own right, had been rendered extinct, absorbed, or reduced to servitude. The Korzaki Empire, spanning 9 sectors and 50 worlds, stood undefeated for over 6 centuries. Their war fleet was a storm of blackened metal, spiked and breathing with atmospheric manipulation fields that drained oxygen from enemy ships before firing a shot. Even the Galactic Concord had long given up attempting diplomacy. The Korzaki did not talk. They conquered. On the Obsidian Throne, in the Warhive of Vraxon, the capital station orbiting Korzak itself, Warlord Vekthal stood before a holographic star map. His carapace gleamed with deep red sigils carved into the exoskeleton by the High Priests of War, each mark a battle won, a world broken. The newest report pulsed at the edge of known space, a probe signal. Not theirs. The chamber fell into silence as the hologram zoomed in. It was an anomaly. The signal pattern was unusual, structured, encrypted in a layered fashion that hinted at both playfulness and complexity. It wasn't a distress call. It wasn't military. It was scientific. A curiosity. Origin. Vekthal growled, his voice like molten iron scraping steel. System Sol. Sector 318. Unclaimed. Weak emissions. Primitive energy signatures. Replied Arch-Technician Scarl. Species unknown. Designation human. Human. Vekthal repeated, the name foreign on his mandibles. He turned toward the gathered war council. Another soft world people, perhaps. Barely spacefaring, no fleet records, no empire. He clicked thoughtfully. Send a scout fleet. I want to see if they will kneel, or if they will scream. Around him, warlords thumped their fists on their chests in approval. But not all were as quick to cheer. A small figure stood in the shadows. Archivist Calrex, not a warrior, but a gatherer of knowledge. He gestured toward the signal again. Warlord, there is something in the transmission. An encryption pattern that shifts. It carries redundancy, but also humor. The room fell still again. Humor, someone scoffed. Yes, Calrex said, stepping forward cautiously. There are sections of the probe signal that appear deliberately nonsensical. Images that shift when viewed from different spectrums. Symbols arranged in chaotic harmony. It's designed not merely to inform, but to provoke thought. To make us laugh. The silence deepened into discomfort. No praise sends such things, Calrex continued. They are not pleading for mercy. They are playing. Vecthal's eyes narrowed. Then perhaps they are arrogant. Or, Calrex offered, perhaps they are something else entirely. There was a heavy pause. Then Vecthal turned back to the map. Let us find out. Send Fleet Fong 6. No more than necessary. If they are weak, they will be crushed. If they are strong, then the game begins. The signal from Sol continued to pulse on the screen, indifferent, patient, blissfully unaware, or perfectly aware, of what it had provoked. And thus, the strongest Deathworld species began its journey toward the stars, not knowing that, for the first time in their history, they were not the hunters. They were being watched, studied, and perhaps, by a species even more dangerous than they could imagine, underestimated star. Would you like to continue with Section 2 next? Absolutely. Here is Section 2, Contact with Humanity, written with a minimum of 700 words. ## Section 2, Contact with Humanity. The scout fleet known as Fong 6 emerged from warp space at the edge of the Sol system in a formation as intimidating as it was efficient. 7 dreadships shaped like serrated blades, their hulls blackened with cosmic dust and battle scars. Each ship bristled with weaponry, from plasma harpoons to matter displacement torpedoes. Any species unfortunate enough to witness their arrival usually had only minutes left to live. This time, however, there was no response. No planetary defense grid. No immediate hailing signal. Earth simply kept spinning. Commander Krelvok clicked in confusion as he scanned the transmissions flooding from the blue-green planet below. No military code. No coordinated response. Are they ignoring us? Another officer asked, incredulous. They must not realize we're here, Krelvok muttered. But the data streams kept coming. They were chaotic, saturated with noise, images of cats falling off tables, debates about pineapple on pizza, snippets of music from orchestras to something called synthwave, and bursts of what seemed like declarations of self-worth wrapped in sarcasm and meme culture. Commander, these transmissions are not alarms. They're entertainment, the comms officer said, voice tinged with disbelief. Humor again? Krelvok growled. The idea still unnerved him. It wasn't long before a vessel approached them from Earth orbit, a sleek, chrome-skinned craft with sweeping curves and energy signatures so refined they barely registered as a threat. The Odyssey, a scientific research vessel, floated calmly toward the Dread Fleet as if it had nothing to fear. The humans hailed first. Unidentified vessels, a smooth voice chimed in perfect galactic standard. Welcome to the Sol system. This is Captain Mira Chun of the Odyssey, a peaceful exploratory ship representing the United Terran Commonwealth. May we offer you tea, data exchange, or assistance? Krelvok stared at the display in stunned silence. Did they just offer tea? He opened the channel. We are Korzak, Deathworlders of the 12th Flame. We do not require assistance. We are here to assess your worth. There was a pause, then a smile from the human. Well, that's refreshing honesty. You're not with the Concord, then. Good. We've always found their bureaucracy a bit dry. Krelvok leaned back, trying to process the human's calm demeanor. No fear. No posturing. Just casual conversation. It felt wrong. Your species is not registered on any known military database, he said, almost as an accusation. That's intentional, Chin replied with a grin. We prefer not to advertise our capabilities unless provoked. The Korzaki officers exchanged uneasy glances. There was no arrogance in her voice, just confidence. As the Odyssey continued transmitting cultural packets, literature, music, historical records, Korzak biologists and strategists pored over the information. Earth was a planet of extremes. Blazing deserts, frozen poles, tectonic instability, predator species ranging from apex felines to microorganisms that could adapt within days. Humanity had emerged from this chaos not only alive but dominant, top of their food chain, not because of strength, but because of adaptability, ingenuity, and a peculiar trait that many species lacked: curiosity. They have no natural weapons, observed one of the biologists. No claws. No armor. Their young are born helpless. And yet, they tame their world. They bend their environment to suit their needs, said another, rather than evolve around it. Even their bodies, a Med officer added, are absurdly fragile. But they have a pain threshold that borders on psychotic. And their immune system is reactive beyond reason. It learns. The data turned darker as they examined human history. Wars that lasted centuries. Civilizations that rose and fell in waves of blood and fire. Mass atrocities. But also brilliant leaps, science, art, philosophy, and eventually, peace. What struck the Korzak most was not the violence. It was the pattern. Every time humanity collapsed, it stood back up stronger. Again, and again, and again. No other species builds monuments on the ruins of their own cities, muttered one Korzak tactician. They don't fear death, said another. They expect it, and then move forward anyway. Back aboard the Odyssey, the Korzak received a final transmission from Earth's central relay. It was a compilation of messages, not from governments but from citizens. Messages of welcome. Jokes. Even challenges. One message stood out, a simple video clip. A man in military fatigue stood in a desert, addressing the camera. We survived ice ages, plagues, and nukes. We climbed out of caves with sticks and walked on the moon. So if you're thinking about invading Earth, He smirked. You better pack a lunch. The transmission ended. Commander Krelvok leaned back in his command chair, mandibles twitching. For the first time, he began to question the nature of this mission. These weren't prey. These weren't just another weak species ripe for domination. They were something else. Would you like to move forward with Section 3, the Spark of War next? Absolutely. Here is Section 3, the Spark of War, written with a minimum of 700 words. Hashtag Section 3, the Spark of War. The Korzak did not believe in hesitation. Their doctrine was simple: strength must be proven, dominance must be displayed. Diplomacy was a delaying tactic for the weak. When Warlord Vekthal received the full report from the Fong-6 scout fleet, he did not flinch at the strange data, nor at the unnerving implications of humanity's history. Instead, he activated the war protocol. Within days, 3 full battle groups launched from Korzak territory, converging at the Sol system in an awe-inspiring demonstration of force. The invasion fleet included orbital destroyers, atmospheric razors, bio-cloaked infiltrators, and elite ground units bred for planetary subjugation. As they burst into Sol space, carving subspace rifts in their wake, the skies across the outer planets trembled. The first targets were Luna, Mars, and Titan, outer colonies deemed to be strategic footholds. The Korzak strategy was precise: hit hard, fast, and leave the Terran Commonwealth disoriented before pressing toward Earth itself. But something was wrong from the start. The initial landing parties on Mars were met with nothing. No alarms. No troops. No panic. The colonial outposts appeared to have been evacuated hours before the Korzak landed. Oddly, all automated systems were still online, broadcasting daily reports and environmental logs as if nothing had changed. Commander Srolnek of the 82nd Ground Legion grew impatient and ordered a full sweep. His warriors marched through the Martian dust, warbeasts sniffing for prey. Then, the mines detonated. Dozens of seismic charges, buried beneath the red soil, erupted with shocking precision. Not mere explosives, but electromagnetic disruptors designed to target Korzak biotech. Their weapons seized up. Their communications collapsed. Even the translation implants began to malfunction, flooding their minds with white noise. Above them, the orbiting dreadships fared no better. A swarm of seemingly harmless Terran maintenance drones latched onto their hulls and burrowed inside. Within minutes, the Korzak fleet began to lose structural integrity. Power grids overloaded. Artificial gravity fields flipped without warning, throwing crews against bulkheads. But the worst was yet to come. The humans never declared war. They simply responded. Without ceremony, a Terran fleet emerged from the shadows of Saturn's rings, ships designed with brutal elegance. Not massive and armored like the Korzak, but sleek, fast, unpredictable. They deployed not in formation but like wolves, hunting, flanking, outmaneuvering. One Korzak cruiser turned to engage a human vessel and found its own targeting systems hijacked, forced to fire on its allies. A second cruiser vanished into an asteroid belt, chasing a decoy signature, only to be torn apart by dozens of stealth mines. A third was boarded from within. Human operatives, cloaked in adaptive camouflage, emerged from maintenance shafts and neural interfaces like phantoms. On Titan, a full battalion of Korzak warriors was decimated by what appeared to be lightly armed Terran infantry. But the humans didn't fight fair. They used smoke, flashbangs, terrain manipulation, and sonic disruptors. One Korzak warrior reported being incapacitated by a blaring signal, later identified as an old human battle chant fused with industrial bass lines and tactical subharmonics designed to trigger nausea in alien nervous systems. Commander Sralnek was captured alive. In interrogation, he was shown recordings of human warfare, urban, guerrilla, digital. He was made to watch how humans, when cornered, didn't surrender. They set traps. They feigned defeat. They cheated. They don't fight like warriors, he hissed. No, the interrogator replied. They fight to win. Humanity's greatest strength wasn't raw power or superior technology. It was adaptability. No tactic was sacred. No weapon off-limits. No scenario beyond their creativity. They had studied every war they ever fought and learned. They had taken the worst of themselves and turned it into something terrifyingly effective. But it wasn't just the military that fought. Civilians participated in ways the Korzak had never imagined. Civilians hacked into Korzak comms with viral code disguised as pop music. Engineers scrambled together EMP arrays out of farm equipment. Children taught AI systems to generate misleading holograms. Humanity was everywhere and nowhere all at once. The turning point came when the Korzak flagship Fury of the Void was infiltrated by a Terran Special Forces team. No alarms were triggered. The team had been aboard for days, blending into the ship's architecture, observing, collecting intel. On the night of their strike, one of them, call sign Spectre, entered Warlord Vekthal's private chamber. The warlord awoke to find a human crouched on a ceiling, upside down. Your species thought you were the apex, the human whispered, voice low and calm. You're not even the final boss. And then he was gone. No shots fired. No casualties. Just a message. Vekthal ordered a full retreat from the Sol system within the hour. He wasn't afraid of defeat. He was afraid of what came next. Would you like to continue with Section 4, The Lesson of Humanity? Of course. Here is Section 4, The Lesson of Humanity, with a minimum of 700 words. Hashtag Section 4, The Lesson of Humanity. When the last Korzak vessel limped out of the Sol system, dragging smoke trails through warp space, the galaxy took notice. For the first time in over 6 centuries, the strongest Deathworld species had retreated, not from overwhelming firepower, not from numerical disadvantage, but from an enemy they hadn't even fully seen coming. In the weeks that followed, debates raged across the outer empires. Was it weakness? Was it caution? Or had the unthinkable occurred? Had the Korzak been outmatched? Back on Korzak Prime, the great warhive Vraxhan stood eerily quiet. No drums of conquest, no roaring celebrations. Warlord Vekthal sat in the inner sanctum, a hollow echo of rage and uncertainty haunting his throne. Around him, his most trusted warlords, those who survived, stood still, unsure of how to interpret what they had witnessed. Not defeat. Not exactly. But something more unsettling, a game played on a board they didn't understand, with rules they never knew existed. We underestimated them, said High Tactician Velksharn, voice low. They were not simply defending. They were studying us. Yes, Vekthal growled, his mandibles twitching. And we taught them everything we knew, while learning nothing of their true strength. In the center of the war chamber, a massive holodisplay flickered to life. It showed Earth, not as a target, but as a mystery. Images flashed across the screen, Human scientists experimenting with quantum shields, artists painting battle scenes from memory, children playing in rubble beside reassembled combat drones. Humanity was not just reactive. It was creative and dangerous. "Why did they let us go?" asked one of the war priests. "They could have annihilated the retreating fleet." "They didn't want to," Calrex the archivist replied, stepping forward from the shadows. "That's what makes them powerful. They don't need to crush. They choose when to strike and when not to." The lesson was deeper than battlefield tactics. The Korzak had always seen strength as domination. But humans, strangely, terrifyingly, understood a kind of strength that didn't need to be loud. Their restraint was strategic. Their chaos, intentional. They were not a race obsessed with conquest. They were a race that could end wars before others realized one had begun. Calrex presented a datapad, scrolling through intercepted Terran documents, philosophical texts, tactical manuals, and something called science fiction. The last entry puzzled many, humans writing stories about species like the Korzak long before they ever met them. "They imagined us," Calrex explained, awe in his voice. "Before we even arrived. They prepared for our tactics by dreaming of worse." No one spoke for a long time. In a strange twist of irony, the Korzak, supreme predators of the known galaxy, had walked into a trap crafted not by a weapon, but by an idea. The idea that no matter how dangerous a being might be, somewhere out there, someone more adaptable, more resilient, and more clever might exist. And worse, might already be watching. Word spread fast. The Concord Council, long fearful of Korzak aggression, sent envoys to Earth, not to offer aid, but to establish alliances. Dozens of other species, many of whom had lived under the looming shadow of Korzak tyranny, now turned to humanity with equal parts gratitude and caution. Some hailed them as saviors, others as monsters in disguise. Humanity, for its part, didn't bask in the attention. The United Terran Commonwealth released a single public statement. "We are not here to conquer. We are not here to rule. But if you bring war to our doorstep, know this. We've been fighting monsters, real and imagined, since we learned how to dream. And we've always written the ending ourselves." That message, transmitted across open channels in every major galactic language, sent chills through even the coldest-blooded strategists. Humanity's strength wasn't rooted in technology or brute force. It was something much harder to quantify. Asterisk narrative dominance. Asterisk they had the ability to frame events in a way that shifted the entire galaxy's perspective. They didn't just win the war. They owned the story. Back in the depths of Raxhan, Vekthal made a choice no Korzak leader had ever made before. He stood. He stepped down from the obsidian throne. And he declared a new doctrine, not of submission, but of understanding. If the Korzak were to continue existing as more than brutal relics of a dying philosophy, they had to evolve. They had to learn, not how to mimic humans, but how to understand what made them dangerous. Because someday, somewhere, they might meet something even stronger. And if that something was human again, the Korzak wanted to be ready. Not to fight, but to survive. Let me know if you'd like help compiling this into a full story doc, formatting it for publishing, or anything else.